Hey, what's going on, everybody? Oliver, welcome. It's so good to see you again. Today is episode 12. I can't believe it. Episode 12, week 12 of this fun adventure together. How are you doing today, sir?
I am very good, very good. Thank you, Jason. How are you 12 weeks in, 3 months down the line?
Well, when you put it that way, I'm doing really good. Yeah, that makes it feel even longer when you say it like that. What kind of fun housekeeping stuff do you have? I know you always have some good updates, some new things coming about, things that are out there before we dive into today's topic.
Yeah, so anybody that's watching out there today, things are progressing very well. The website is now up and running, as we announced last week. Don't forget, you can catch live or previous on-demand episodes of all the previous 11 episodes, and hopefully by the end of this week. Well, I say hopefully, it's going to be by the end of this week because we don't edit anything that we do. Unless you're listening on a podcast, maybe you get a couple of cheeky edits. I don't know. So you can check out all of our previous episodes at callcenterconfidence.com. And don't forget, you can also sign up at lu.ma, so lu.ma/callcenterconfidence for live notifications. Every time we go live, they get an email in their inbox with a link. Boom. Don't even need to think about it. Don't even need to find us. And it takes you straight to the website where you can watch live every week. I haven't even checked to see if we're streaming on the website. I'm pretty sure we are. Yeah, I can check that now. So, we already got people on the website watching. So I'm happy.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I am also signed up through the Luma to be a host, but I get the emails, and it makes me very excited. I get all these emails saying that you're going to be going live soon, and we're going live soon, and it just makes me feel good. I check my inbox, and I've got these emails from Oliver, and it just makes me smile.
Winning at live. Winning. So look, episode 12, 3 months in. It's our 3-month anniversary. I feel like we should have got each other a cake. Where are we going today, Jason? What's the hot topics that we're going to be discussing with Call Center Confidence?
So where we've come in our progression, last week we were talking about managing versus coaching versus mentoring. And one of the biggest things that happens is that when somebody, let's say, leaves the nest and they get into their sales role, and we're managing, coaching, or mentoring them, as we talked about last week, is there's a progression. There's a point at which they're getting better and better, right? As you refer to it, is when they get to the point where they're competent, right? Where they reach that competency. You want to get them as far as you can in training, but obviously most of it's going to be on the job training. There's only so much you can teach them, right? Like we've talked about, drinking from a fire hose is what a new hire training is going to feel like. And so it's really about being able to know if your team is winning or not and how they're doing with the progression, whether they are progressing or not, because sometimes maybe they're not, maybe they are. A lot of times what happens is that you know that they're doing well, but then you have to explain that to management or the reporting or the KPIs. And sometimes it's tough to know, like, okay, how do I know Bob is doing well? Is Jill on the right path? How do I ensure they're on the right path? And then how do I know, okay, this is a good investment, or is it not going to work?
No, I love that. I think that's great because, there's so many ways to look at this. There's so many ways to break every single thing down to prove that it's working or it's not working, and the fact that we can communicate it. So that is today's topic. We're going to be jumping into that amongst other things. So don't forget, leave your comments in the comment section. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on LinkedIn, if you're watching on the website, obviously you can jump to LinkedIn and Facebook. You can leave comments there as well. And we can talk about them as it happens. Because we've got people from all over the world watching right now. And again, these topics are topics asked for by you, people who are watching these episodes or listening to them post live. And also don't forget, you can watch the first 3 episodes on Instagram. Yes, the Instagram page is up and running at Call Center Confidence. And the rest will be there. We almost got banned for a moment because I was uploading too much content at once, but we're good. We're good. So, we're up and running. So I've got to tell you that, Jason. So yeah, that's fresh news for you. All right. So diving into the areas and the kind of area that we want to talk about today, that's such a broad topic. So where do you want to begin? Where do you want to kickstart? Because there's so much on that journey there to make sure we get it right.
I think the part that I'd love to hear from you first is So if we're talking about this managing, coaching, mentoring, and you've got someone who left the nest and they're in their sales role, what are the signs? Like, let's not talk about the KPIs yet. Maybe a little stats, but what are the signs that you look for as a manager leader of someone in that role who's not quite hitting their numbers because they're progressing, right? The goal is maybe 3 sales a day or 2 sales a week, and they're not. But what are the signs and signals you're looking for that says this person is on the right path? This person might be on the right path, but this is going to take extra work. Or this person, I don't know what path they're on, but it's not this one.
Do you know what? I look at it in a few ways, really. And I actually boil back to a statement that we kind of talked about in the first couple of episodes, that great companies are built on great people. And that was from Jack Welch, General Electric. And my old CEO of a company, the last company I worked for in London, used to talk about it all the time. And it was something that was very big on his agenda, that making sure we had the right people in the business. So when we talk about these performance signs and we talk about what we're looking for and the signs that should, raise alarm bells, is, for me, it's a matrix about values, or should I say a graph of values versus performance. So you look at that and you can break it down. I've got my whiteboard somewhere, which I'll crack out in a minute. So when you're talking, I'll kind of do a demonstration. But what we are looking for is somebody who might not be performing, but they have the values to be there, such as attitude, punctuality, being on time, determined to learn, determined to work hard, determined to be there. For me, these are the types of people that you can work with. And these, when you see the signs that, yes, do you know what? Maybe they're not hitting their KPIs, because you get your KPI report daily. As a leader, you should always be looking at your KPI reports from the previous day, previous month, previous week, however it is you track it. But comparing it to the person that is sat in that seat making those dials and making those calls. So for me, if they're not hitting their numbers, but their attitude is there, I'll give them the benefit of doubt. I work with them. And that boils back down to the whole coaching, mentor, leader role that we talked about before, where you may have to change your style between what type of role you're working with to help them through it. But for me, the signs that I'm looking for when they are not performing and they've got the wrong attitude. So if they've not got the targets and they are not the type of person that wants to support other people, who wants to be there, who's late, who's constantly calling out sick and things like that, they're the other signs that we should be looking for to work out how we should manage those people. Because do they want to be there? And those people usually self-select. But I'll give you my graph in a minute, which will give you a little bit more detail. I don't know. I should have been prepared with a whiteboard for this question.
No worries. So it was on the graph, it's values and what? What were the two parts of the graph?
For me, it's values and performance. Look at that. There we go. I'm just going to clean my whiteboard. All right. I'm going to do this as we go. All right. So this is on the fly. I love this. I actually include this in one of my coaching workshops for leaders because it's a really good way to look at it, especially when you're trying to manage performance of certain individuals and look at the people that we work with. And again, I got this from my old CEO who got it from Jack Welch. And don't get me wrong, it's probably not just from him on his own. Other people probably would have come up with something like this before. So if we look at, let's put, and bear in mind, this is rough, but my handwriting is appalling, by the way. All right. Let me just do that. So what I've done, okay, is.
And while you're doing that, Al, who's tuned in, which is great. Good to see you every week, Al. Appreciate that. He says grit. And then he also put in here talking about like what we're looking for. Major difference in approach for newbies and veteran trainees. Obviously what you're looking for, someone who's new to sales versus someone who's been in sales, and what you're hoping to see them accomplish. So, all right, show everyone the graph here now that I've highlighted you. I've made it all about you.
You don't need to make it all about me, but what I will say is, Al, if my wife is watching right now, she's going to be jumping up and down the grit. She's a big supporter of that, and that's definitely on her agenda. So, okay, I don't know whether you can see this. Put it up there. I've got some lights in the background. So, if you're looking at it from one way for the other, so you've got your performance, okay, which is going that way. And then you've got your values, which is going this way. So these are the two ways that we track it. And then what you do is you break your candidates down into, or you break your employees down to 4 categories. You have your A players, your B players, your C players, and your D players. Okay. Now, ultimately, in the ideal world, you want your high performers to have high value, which puts them as an A candidate. So these are the people that you don't necessarily always need to worry about. Okay. These are the people that you can let go. They can do their thing and they can kind of rock and roll on their own. Now, don't get me wrong. We still need to spend time working on our A players completely, because it's not a point just to neglect them, because eventually what will happen is if you neglect an A player, their values will still be the same, but their performance might dip. So they might drop back down into the B section. Now, for me, the B players are your next category. These are the people that you look to coach and mentor and lead, because they've got the values. They want to be there. These are the people that are on time, willing to learn, as I mentioned a minute ago, but their performance isn't right there. So they need that coaching. Okay. Your D players, from the performance aspect versus the values aspect, they don't really want to be there. They're not performing on a daily basis. If they've not got the stats, then essentially they will self-select themselves. They'll self-manage them out of the business. These are the people that will eventually be managed out because they're not performing. Now, highlighting the point that managers at this point will need to be monitoring KPIs. They need to manage people. So many leaders and managers shy away from these difficult conversations. Ultimately, your D players, they will go. They'll have to be managed out. And your C players have the performance, but they don't necessarily have the values. So, Jason, my question to you is, what do you think is the worst player on this board? All right. Where is the worst person on this board?
I would probably say C.
Tell me why. What do you think? I'm putting you on the spot.
Because they think they're doing well and they think they should be there and they think they deserve accolades and more money, but they're just not a good fit from a value, mindset, culture fit.
100%. And this is the problem that so many companies face out there, is the fact that they're performing. These are people that are your nesters, your new hires, the people that come out there, whoever they might be, they're performing, they're delivering, but their attitude stinks. And we've all worked for these people. We've all had these people work for us. Now, the problem is they're the worst people to manage, because these are the cocky people that come in, the people that are like, I can't be touched, I'm so good, but you know what, right, I'm going to make my manager's life a living misery, because you can't do anything about it. Now, obviously you can have conversations about attitude, but how do you deal with these people? So these are the signs that I always like to look at, especially when people are early out, they're starting out, and you look at where they are. For me, this is where I like to use my grid, and I know a lot of people kind of use this at the same time. But it gives you an insight into the type of people that you have. Now, in an ideal world, we also can manage our leaders, our managers on this same board as well. Which managers are there? Which managers perform? Which managers let their team perform? So in effect, they perform. But do you know what? That manager doesn't want to be there. That manager keeps calling out sick. That manager makes their manager's life a living misery. So again, you can use this as high up the chain as you want to go, and you can break your characters down. But, you know, I was shown this by a CEO many years ago, and for me, it stuck with me. I always talk about it in detail. I mean, I could talk about this easily for our entire session, which I'm not going to do. But it's a good measuring tool for anybody out there. Put it on the board. And do you know what? You can categorize. Take your A's, your B's, your C's, and your D's off the board and start listing your people in those categories, because then you realize where your people are, and then the signs that may be pointing at the people not performing or not highlighting, it's actually down on paper rather than you thinking about it. And the fact is, you can measure it. So, for example, your A players, these are the people that hit target. Your C players, these are the people that hit target. But then you categorize them into one of two ways. Do they have attitude? Do they not have attitude? Bang, put them on the board. This is how you can manage your team very quickly and effectively, by putting it out, and you can keep an eye on the warning signs that might be put in front of you. What do you think of that, Jason?
I love it. I think it's a great visual for people listening to the podcast who are trying to imagine what you drew. Obviously, if you're listening to this, make sure and go to the Call Center Confidence site or the YouTube channel, Instagram, wherever, or you could just email info@callcenterconfidence.com, and I'm sure Oliver will reply with a nice doodle of that.
I'll
so
even
for people who want to see it, because I think it's important to see
sticking it up on the page.
Site?
I'll put a little picture up on the page.
Perfect. So what do I think about? I think it's brilliant, as you would say. I think it's a great representation. And I think the key is, and what makes that such a great answer for what I was looking for, which is this kind of nebulous concern or issue that sales leaders face, which is how do I know this person is on the right path, is putting them in those different quadrants relative to how they're doing. Performance, they're going to be low if they're new. Okay, they're a B player. Performance, they're either B or D. But then the value side, which is if somebody can imagine a quadrant or a matrix, and the left side is the values going from low to high, then how would you score that person based on the values that are important? The mission, the vision, the core values of the company, what you have set as expectations. You mentioned it. Do they show up on time? Or are they always late? Do they always want to leave early? Are they always calling out sick? Are they constantly needing to take breaks, or it's hard to find them at their desk or logged in on their phone? Like, is there availability? Because you and I run money inbound centers where we need people to be available. Like, I need you to take calls, because when calls are coming in, it's very important, especially in sales and service. And so how do they fit? And you can look at those. What's cool, like you said, is you can measure those. You can measure attendance, tardiness, and things like that, and put a objective figure to something that might feel subjective, which is, are they a good cultural fit? And you can see it. Compliance scores. Maybe they're not the best at selling yet, but they're compliant. QA is giving them good scores. They have a good attitude on the calls, like all of these things. And if the performance is not there, put them into your matrix in the B category. And then it's about the coaching, mentoring, and managing them to the A. Like, do they have those traits? And I think that's a great representation. And it's interesting because I've been working on the stats project I mentioned to you before we came on here. So I want to start putting some stats out here so it's not just two dudes just making up stuff about sales and hopefully people believe us. But here's a stat that I found relative to kind of ties into this, which is, 84% of sales leaders today do not actually believe they have the team to make great results and achieve success. Like that's not, I don't have it. It's, I don't think I have it. Right. And the reference is on there. If you're listening to the podcast, let me know. I can get you a reference for any stats. And I think when you look at that stat and sales leaders who I just don't have the right people, most of the time in my experience, they just want the A players, the perfect fit. They want someone who shows up and knows how to do it. And they're not putting in the effort and categorizing them and then moving them up or out such that they have the confidence that they have the right team. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And, I love the stats in there. And as you say, for me, that highlights just proof and evidence that, what we're trying to do, what anybody else is trying to do out there to try and help leaders, help managers, support them, to make them feel like there are people out there trying to help them. In a sense, putting them into these 4 categories, as you were saying, marking them out, it's 4 simple categories that you can actually mark your team by. I've been into companies before where they'll mark a person on a grading of 1 to 10. And I'm like, how do you justify a 1 to 10? It's the same way when people recruit, they give them a score. Well, how do you quantify that score? And, by putting them into those 4 categories, or to putting them into 3 categories or 2 categories, you are then making sure that you are being specific and to the point of what you're trying to do with these people. And especially when you've got new people out the gate coming into an existing role or a new role that might be created for them, how do you justify that new role that's been created is actually working, is actually doing its job? Are you commissioning this role? Are you bonusing that role? What's the metrics? And it boils back down to what we say every week. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Sales leaders out there doing something like this that just use their own opinion on things. And that's not to say your opinion's right or wrong, because everybody has their own thought process. And when you've done things long enough, your gut is right, But if I put somebody out there for the very first time, if I couldn't justify and manage and measure exactly what they're doing to have the warning signs that this is working, it is not working, or then I would be worried and I wouldn't be doing my job right. And I would actually probably be setting this person up to fail.
Yeah. Well, and most of my career has been spent in managing people and operations in California. And what that means is that you need a lot of documented proof to protect yourself if you ever have to let somebody go. It wants to protect employees so much and against wrongful termination and all these things, which are good rules to have in place. But what it does is it makes you, as a manager, you just have a lot of CYA that you've got to do, which means when you're good at it, it means as a leader, it's documenting everything and making things objective. It's not, I don't like Bob because Bob's not very good. It's, here's what Bob is supposed to be doing. Here's the measurements. Here's where we're at. And these categories you were talking about in the quadrant too, which is, again, these things that are generally subjective or on a 1 to 10 scale. It's like, how'd you pick an 8 for Bob? And why did Sue get a 10? Like, how, like, what are you doing? It's just how you feel. And so it really changes the game. And I always work with companies on that. It's like, okay, how do we take everything and make it a metric such that it's clear? It's not personal. It's not, I don't like you. It's, you aren't performing, or here's what we need, or here's where we need to coach you to, or here's how I can help you. Because many times I've dealt with sales managers who come to me and say, they need to go. They're not performing. It's like, based on what? Well, they're not hitting their numbers. Okay. Is it them or is it you? Like, I don't even know. Like, how are we doing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you have to be able, it boils back to the same word, you have to justify, you have to be able to put something to it. You know, I've seen people be made redundant because they weren't the right fit in their manager's eyes. I've seen people let go, not because they weren't performing, but because, you know, somebody thought, well, do you know what, they're a bit of a nightmare to manage. Well, step up and be a leader.
Yeah.
You know, be able to have those difficult conversations. And I think that's one of the hardest things that leaders, as much as they say they can do it, they can't always do it. So learning from somebody else, learning from people that do know how to have those difficult conversations is a good way to go about it. I mean, tips for me is my tip when you have a difficult conversation is to suck it up and just do it, because at the end of the day, it's your head that's then on the chopping block from your manager because you haven't done it. But I think some people try to be everybody's friend, and friendships sometimes in those environments don't work. Some do. Some definitely do, because people believe in their manager because they've got that focus, they've got that lead in them. But there are some people, like I say, if your face doesn't fit, sometimes you're out the door, and that's the worst thing about it.
Yeah, and I think especially if we go back to that matrix where if somebody's not a good fit, right? They're the C players who performance-wise they're doing well, values, fit for the company, culture, you know, compliance, all those things aren't there, but they're performing. Those ones are tough. And when you see that in a manager, right? Because you mentioned it, you use this with leaders and managers as well. So for owners and executives watching or listening to this, like apply that to them, and you'll see a manager who they get good results, they're performing with their team, but they're difficult to deal with, right? And then you're not getting what you need. And then how do you have that? But I agree, the difficult conversations, especially if someone's underperforming, either they're not a good fit for the company or they're not getting the results like from a KPI sales metrics. The thing I always remember when I have those difficult conversations, which I do not enjoy, is that every day they're going home knowing that they're losing, and it's not good. They're not going home happy going, yeah, this is cool. I once again did not close enough deals and I may or may not be fired tomorrow. Like, they're having that dialogue in their head. And so the sooner you can have a conversation and just be transparent, I've always found that to be the best.
Yeah. And you have to be honest. You have to be. You can't hide these types of things and bury it and bury your head in the sand and hope it will go away. That just doesn't work. And for anybody out there, you know, aspiring to be a leader, somebody who is a leader, or for somebody who is dealing or managing somebody in their team that is difficult to manage, or you are finding it a struggle to manage them, like Jason and I have said time and time again, and go back and listen to the previous episodes, you've got to go in there with evidence. You've got to go in there with proof and justification, because when you go in there with somebody and they are difficult to manage, or you are struggling to manage them, if you can literally say, hey, look, you are not performing here, 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 and here, put the onus on them And I think that's one thing that managers forget is when they go into these types of scenarios, they forget that you can put, as a friend of mine likes to use, you put the monkey on somebody else's shoulder, right? And you put it on them to tell you why they are not performing, why they are struggling. Let them tell you, because the minute you can do that, those conversations become a lot easier, because then they have to justify why they're not performing. They have to turn around and say, well, actually, do you know what? Your figure, Jason, is wrong. This is what I did. And then all of a sudden you can find maybe a common ground. But if they're the ones telling you they didn't perform because X, Y, and Z happened, then go, well, why did it happen? Find out. And another good friend of mine always says, ask the question why 5 times and you'll always get the truth. You'll find out. You'll get the information you need eventually.
Well, and I think that when we're talking about this, like, again, the starting point of today was signs that your team is progressing or that salesperson's progressing, even if the final numbers aren't there, right? Again, you need 3 sales a day. They're not hitting it, but how do you know they're moving forward? Part of it, I think, is putting realistic milestones as somebody's going to progress. 3 deals a day. You know that it's going to take X number of weeks or months, like, to do that consistently, not a good day and then a bad day. I mean, like, consistently day in and day out. And then work backwards and set those milestones, and then have those conversations like you're saying, and set the expectation and be like, all right, in this next month, here's what we, long term, here's what we need. Short term, here's where you should be. Here's where you should be performing. And then get their buy-in, and then have them set their goals and their activity levels, and then hold them to that. And I think that's really the values piece that you're talking about, which is you're going to show up on time. To make this successful, you're going to need to have this many phone calls, this many quotes or demos, this many whatevers, like a day or a week, and then checking in with them and saying, okay, are they progressing or are they full of excuses, right? Like, where are they at in that continuum, and how are they doing? Are they moving forward? Because here's one of the things, and this is going to go into the next topic, which I love it when I don't warn you what I'm going to do to you. But question I'm going to ask is for me, it's not just about flash in the pan success. It's not, let's say, using a metric of 3 sales a day, right? Just talking about that. Someone who can do 3 sales a day or 15 sales a week, and then next week they're doing 2 for the whole week, right? And this up and down. For me, it's consistent. How do you consistently win? Everyone has a bad day. Everyone will have a bad week. But like, looking over long term, there's more peaks than valleys. And it's more just like either steady increase or just this gradual slope, or, even just consistently. I think that's so much more important, more valuable than the up and downs, especially from like a mental standpoint, because it's really hard to do the up and down as a rep. But let me ask you this. What do you think about the times when you have a salesperson leaves the nest, hit the floor, and just come out and absolutely crush it, right? Could call it beginner's luck. And then they just fall flat and die. Like, their performance is just garbage after that. What do you think about what may cause that to happen? What to do about it in the moment, afterwards? Go.
So, okay, look, I think this is a really great question, because there are so many call centers out there that have people that go out there and do this. Is it beginner's luck? Is it just on a whim? Or is it the fact that they got excited, they came out the gate, they did everything they learned in training, then picked up bad habits from everybody else, and then dropped off the radar? There are so many factors to put into play with beginner's luck. For me, I like to go back to, again, it says the same thing. It's evidence and it's proof, right? I will go back to evidence and proof to find out what they did right, and I'll work with them to build that. Now, so beginner's luck happens. We know it happens just by pure pick of the coincidence, the right calls fall in the laps at the right time. I remember my first telesales job. I was working in a retentions team, and my job was to turn an unhappy customer back into a happy customer and send them on their way. But we got paid on that. But we also got paid on contract renewals and things like that. And I remember the amount of times that customer service would just phone through and say, hey, I've got a customer that wants to renew their contract. It was one of those moments where you just stand up and go, I'm getting paid and I haven't got to do any work, because it was as simple as that. So yes, it can be classed as beginner's luck. Yes, somebody can, on an inbound campaign, somebody phones up knowing they want to buy already because they've made 5-6 phone calls previously and the other person hasn't done their job. They've done their job effectively to pass on the knowledge, but they've not done their job effectively to close the deal because the customer wasn't emotionally ready to buy. And that happens, granted. When you are on a first-time inbound call or a first-time outbound call and a customer buys from you, there are a lot of things to consider. And that could be, you landed in someone's lap at the right time. They've already been shopping. You just happen to give them what they want. But for me, I will go back to those winning calls. I will listen to those calls, or I will get the team leaders or the managers or whoever it is. If I'm a client and I'm working externally, I will do the work on this. I'll listen to that call. I will find out all of the areas, and I like to use these 2 words, strengths and opportunities. I don't like to use strengths and weaknesses. It's strengths and opportunities. So what did they do really well and where can they improve? Those are those 2 key factors. And what I would do with those points is I will then pluck those areas out. And then I would sit down with that agent and go, right, okay, look, in the first 2 weeks when you smashed it out the gate, this is what you did well. This is your areas of opportunities. I want you to listen to the calls. I want you to find out exactly which parts I'm talking about. And I also want you to come back with some more information for me. Then we will do this week's calls where they bombed hard and they died because all of a sudden beginner's luck is gone and it started to weigh itself out. I will then get them to implement them and then tell me where they could have put those skills on the winning calls into those bad or negative non-sales calls or whatever you want to call them. So at that point, they then realize, and again, and I think, you said it best with those 2 words, get their buy-in, get their understanding and get their thoughts and their feelings on, actually, now I need to do that. And it's ongoing training, it's development. And you're the one that's giving them that information so that when they do go back out there, they take that, they roll with it, and you hope to see another increase in numbers and everything kind of go back to where it was. Now, don't get me wrong, that might not happen all the time, but you are at least going back over common ground of successes, opportunities, and a way forward. That would be my approach. What about your thoughts on beginner's luck?
Yeah, I think there's several reasons it can happen. You mentioned them. Just to reiterate, sometimes just literally get lucky calls, right? The one thing I have told literally every trainer and every new trainee is that your first deal will come at the intersection of somebody you're speaking with who is an absolute laydown, who is ready to buy no matter what. And you just need to be nice and not screw it up too bad. Usually, most people's first sale is not a result of skill. It's not because they're so amazing, especially when it's in training or in nesting. It's literally how quickly can you find someone who was mostly ready and you were just nice. Just be nice. Some people get that on their first call. Sometimes it takes weeks for someone to just pull the slot machine enough times to actually get lucky enough to win a prize. So there's that. And then there's the people who, you said it, and I love it. We will use that as a sound bite clip in all of our marketing, which is like they went through training and nesting and they did everything they were trained to do on those phone calls and actually did it and it worked. And then like they close deals. And then in my experience, what happens is they start thinking they know everything and they just go off the reservation and start just freestyling or doing their own thing or assuming they already know all the objections. So let me just deal with them in advance, right? I call them rebutting with yourself, pre-objecting, where it's like, hey, I know you haven't asked me about this, but let me just explain and give you a long monologue about X, Y, and Z. So I think beginner's luck is a thing. And I think one of the biggest challenges, both for salespeople and for managers, is if you're not aware of how this works and the dynamic and then how to recover from it, you might get the impression that a salesperson is amazing, right? I've had many owners who are like, hey, Kim is amazing. She is crushing it in her first week of sales. It's like, let's hold on before we crown her like the queen of all sales. Like, let's see if you can continue it, because it might fall off the map. And when it happens, a lot of managers aren't prepared with, okay, how do we pick up the pieces? Or how do we mitigate it so it doesn't happen in the first place? And I think like here's another stat that I had found, and it kind of ties into this, which is 90% of sales training initiatives have no lasting impact after 120 days. So there's all
Yep.
these things that people are getting taught and they're being trained. And then like beginner's luck, they start doing well. This kind of goes into how do you know people are successful, goes into what we talked about several weeks ago about continuing and continuous education, like how important the manager, coaching, mentor relationship is to keep people going, especially when somebody has beginner's luck, comes out strong, and then just falls flat. It's like, okay, how do I pick them back up?
It's one of those things where, you know, we all say you learn the job whilst doing the job, and that's how you pick it up. Was it 70% of the job is done by doing it?
Yeah.
The best thing, or the best, one of the best LMS platforms, or to be fair, I would call it a plug-in to an existing LMS platform, so you could use it as both. I came across this company about 2 years ago, and they were the way their machine learning and their AI works in it is fantastic. And what I want to say is it would spit out training based on your personal profile, and it would throw it out to you based on how the machine learns how you learn. And I found it really intentional. I think a few other platforms do this now, but it was the time when the first company I came across that did this. And I'm still very close with some of the sales team and the management team for the company. They're actually based out of San Francisco, and they showed me this product where you'd take a test, and if you failed it, it would probably spit it out again tomorrow and say, hey, look, you know, Oliver, you failed the test, take it again tomorrow. And it would be sales training, video content, material, product knowledge, whatever it might be. And it learns how quickly knowledge in your brain deteriorates based on the quiz it presents you. And what it would then do is it would learn over the space of a few weeks to a few months an automation process, and it would build a profile on you. And let's say, for example, I decided to use this company and say, hey, look, I'm going to throw out some sales training, some new closing techniques that I want you to use with our products, and some new rebuttals. Okay, which is great. Everybody wants new rebuttals because that's what we're going through. And it would say, well, do you know what? Oliver's rate of learning deteriorates here, and then it picks up again here, and then it drops off here. And then it would spit it out like 2-3 days before that gap, send you a test. And if you passed it, it would then go, right, okay, right, I've got another 6 months till I spit it out again. Or do you know what? He failed it. I'm going to spit it out again in 10 hours, but I'm going to rejig the questions, and it's all automated. It was phenomenal. Because this is the type of thing where you can plug a lot of those gaps, especially product knowledge, especially sales knowledge. I think those are the types of systems that work well, especially in a fast-paced environment where you don't have time. And it's all done on your phone as well. You get a little notification on your phone, and it says, hey, take a test. You can do it on the bus. Going to work. It's great.
Yeah, and I think especially with tools like that, and just as the leadership is to look at these things like we're talking about, how do you know someone's on the right track? Are they progressing? Are they getting to where you need to be? And I think it's really that time horizon. Like as you're talking about, I'm thinking, okay, how long are you looking at the numbers? Right? And that just depends on the center and the sales cycle, which is depending on how long of a game you're playing for each sale, right? Are you doing like same day close, longer sales cycle, what that looks like? Then you know, okay, let's look at a week, let's look at a month. How long are you looking? And then setting those milestones. And then, you know, how do you make sure they're moving forward? How do you give them the tools? You know, and just ensure. I mean, I know Al had put in a comment a while ago talking about the fact that it's, you know, it's relative to, you know, lots of things, what players on the campaigns when you're talking about your matrix, but what the campaign goals are. Is it a sprint or a marathon, right? He's talking about the basketball analogy, right? A season sweep or building a road to the championship, right? So it's like, you know, what kind of sales cycle, what kind of employees, how long do people stay? You know, you've got to know that game before you start doing this. And a lot of times managers and leaders don't know, or they're not thinking about it. And they're either too quick to fire or give people too much rope, give people too much time.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I think, you know what, it can be one of those things. It can be frustrating. You know, you can go through it, you can learn from it. But I mean, ultimately, people need to learn from this, right? People need to take things away. I mean, if you were to give some people advice on all of these topics that, you know, what we're discussing now, of some key takeaways, and I'm putting you on the spot as usual, firing it right back. You know, what would you suggest? You know, people in this situation, or people who have gone through this situation, you know, any key points that you would say, hey, go away, do this, pick up that, focus on this, focus on that. What would you say?
I think one of the biggest things that I recommend is to take any historical data that you've got as an organization and look at who's winning or who you considered to win by the numbers long term, and then reverse engineer their evolution and their progression towards competency and consistency, right? Which is one of the things I do with a lot of my clients, to figure out what was the road, right? Because it's really easy to look at a superstar, to look at a LeBron James, or look at someone like that who's playing at their peak and go, okay, well, you just be amazing like that. And if you're not amazing like that, then, you know, there's no hope for you. But to go back and go, okay, what was it like when they were a rookie, right? What did they do when they were new in that, you know, whatever, right? Look, talking about sports, very few athletes come out in their rookie year and just absolutely crush it and then consistently crush it. There's some people like that. But if you look at the career of someone who you deem successful now, do that same thing in sales, reverse engineer, look backwards and go, hey, their first week they did this, their first month they did this, their first quarter they did this, here's what their first year was, then here's what that looked like, right? Was it a hockey stick? Was it just a gradual thing? What were the ups and downs? And then build your accountability plan and expectation plan for new reps around what you want from not just superstars, but people who are successful and winning at the game that you're playing. Build that and go, okay, based on what we know, in the first month, here's where they need to be, right? We want 3 sales. They should be here a week. Maybe that's 10, right? Okay, here's where we need. And then hold people accountable, and then set that expectation with your salespeople, and then hold them to the activities they need, and then monitor those. Always remember, you can't control results. You can only control actions and activities. Right? Like if I want to lose weight, I can't necessarily control how much weight I can lose or will lose, but I can control diet, exercise, things like that. And so the inputs are all I can do. So how are you managing your salespeople to their inputs, to their actions and activities? And then how does that relate to or keep them on the path to progress long-term? So it's not just up and down, right? It's not just, hey, they were great and then they burnt out or they failed and we couldn't recover, because that's not going to do any good either. And so how do you build that? Because the other topic, which we kind of have on the docket for the next thing to talk about, but this will go into that when we're ready, is the usage of the performance improvement plan, or whatever you want to call it for your organization, which is you're not hitting the metrics. How do we get you there? And or else, right? Like, what does that look like? But you've got to know what that plan, and again, not have it be subjective. Not just like, hey, you should be doing good, and if you're not, or else.
Yeah, no, I see that. And I want to touch on something you said there about, you know, making sure that we kind of create, or companies create, that kind of path, the metrics, the map, the roadmap of where they want to be. As an example, I'm working with a new call center that's setting up at a minute. And yes, we can go out to the industry and work out what standard sales stats should be achievable for the agents that we're putting out there selling X product. But as much as there's an industry standard and there's company standards, you will only know what you can achieve by when you put people in those seats to see what they can achieve. Now, we have a goal in mind. We have a KPI that I'm working with the client on at the moment, especially to put in place, and we think we have it nailed down. But when these guys start dialing next month, and they start going out there, are they going to be hitting the 1s, the 2s, the 3s a day that we think they're going to achieve? Because you know what, that's what everybody else does. Or because they've got more tools than everybody else, are they going to hit 4, 5, 6? We don't know. So commission plans, comp plans, salary plans, hourly rates, the way that we're going to ramp this team up, because we think that, you know, we're actually going to need probably more 10, 20, 30, 40 seats long term. We don't know until you trial it. And I think that's the same for managers. You know, when you've got new people coming out the gate, if you don't have an expectation, trial it, see what you get, work with it, work together with your team. But if they do come out the gate and it goes back to that beginner's luck and they do what they want, keep that, I can't even speak. Keep that beginner's luck going. Work with them, support them, coach them, develop them, incentivize them. I mean, look, incentives, they go a long way. There are a lot of people in sales that hate incentives. We've got the cruise directors that we spoke about last week, right? That do incentive and comp plans and things like that. Incentives go a long way. We spoke about it last week. If you want to see the incentives piece, jump back to last week because there was so much to talk about when it came to incentives. And we actually got a lot of questions off the back of it. And I know it's a hot topic for everybody. But there is so much you can do with this. So much you can walk away with. There is so much you can learn. But remember, it boils down to the right things, just to make sure that whatever you're putting in place, whatever you're doing to work towards it, you're getting the results that you want and you're getting the measurements and the traffic that you want to get out of it.
Yeah. And I think one of the big keys is to be careful, because we've talked about this several times in the past, is that a lot of sales leaders were in sales and they moved up because they were really good at sales. And I'm not going to talk about the promoting people from within when it's done wrong. So, because we've covered that and many times, but when it's done right, when somebody is a good leader and a really good salesperson, and then they can help. They become a great coach, a great mentor. Like, they know how to do it. One of the challenges, though, is because they were good and maybe they came out of the gate really strong, they're holding everyone else to a standard that they're playing by, right?
Yeah.
And they're not being fair to the average human. Right? Like, I'm always conscious of that, which is, okay, what could I sell this? What volume could I close these deals versus what are going to be the, average performing salespeople in the center. Right. And I know that you've mentioned that before too. It's like, okay, so I'm not going to hold everyone else to my own standard because that's not fair. And I'm not saying I'm the best, but you can close a little bit better than average. And so, that's where I want people to get to, but I'm not going to okay, well, in my first week, I closed this many sales, so you should be too, right? And I see that a lot with sales leaders who were really good sales reps, and then they're holding people to a standard that's just not fair.
Yeah. And no one likes to be held to a standard they're not achieving, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And just to reiterate, if anybody is wanting to talk about stepping up from sales leaders to sales managers and doing that kind of promotionary tract, jump back to episodes 1 and 2 where we talked about that in a lot more detail about making sure that we step up the right way rather than the wrong way. People are not set up to fail in that industry, and it happens, unfortunately. We've all been there, we've all done it. And if you're listening afresh and you've recently been promoted, then let us know. Give us a shout, give us a comment, or check out the previous episodes because we talked about that in a lot more detail.
Well, which is interesting because I think this is a good place to actually stop for the week before we dive into something and kind of pull the fuse on another topic, but then have to go. But here's another stat that I found. This kind of ties into what you just said, which is over 60% of sales reps say they're more likely to leave their job if their manager is a poor coach. Over 2/3 of employees reporting to a manager who is not a good coach are considering quitting. And so when you look at that, I think it's becoming more and more commonplace that people understand that people leave jobs because of management or leadership, not money, not other things. I mean, now flexibility with work from home is a big factor for people who may or may not stay. But, you see a lot of people who stay in jobs where they're not making as much money as they could, but they have a manager they appreciate or respect, enjoy working for, and that makes the difference, feel like supported. And in a sales role, that goes a long way too. It's like, if you have somebody who's not a good coach and not a good manager or a good mentor or any of those, then it doesn't matter what they're making, because they can go play for a different team and do something else. And so as an organization, you want to make sure that you're supporting your leaders that you're promoting or that you're having running your teams, your coaches, your managers, because you could be triggering some turnover in your organization because of that. And this ties into this progression of how the reps do, because if the reps are struggling and they're not they're in that B category from your diagram where the values are high, the performance is low, and they have a manager who's not effective at coaching, leading, managing, then they're more likely to quit because they're not hitting the performance and it doesn't feel good to them.
And you know what? I think you hit the nail on the head. You got to remember, if you're a senior manager and you've got leaders underneath you, they still need support. They still need training. It's not just your frontline teams that are going to walk away. It's your frontline team's leaders that can also walk away in these situations. So it's the same thing. Just because you're a leader of leaders doesn't mean you don't have to worry about them and they're towing the line with the company. They can fall into the same boat. And that's something you need to consider at all times. It's you're never safe. Your team are never comfortable. And that's one thing you need to remember. And even if as well, you're managing administration teams, HR. I know HR is a big topic that people have been talking about. Training, workforce, all of these other areas of the business, which we're going to get to. Trust me, we will get there. These are other areas where you're not managing frontline staff. You're managing other personnel within the business that you always need to consider the same factor. Don't just worry about it. It's important.
Yeah, and it's important too. I'm glad that you brought that up, which is for the executives or the business owners whoever's managing managers and leaders is the same thing. How do you know they're progressing? What is their metrics? How do you know they're doing well? Because it's not fair, just like it's not fair to expect a new rep out of the nest to meet quota day in and day out like a robot. It's also not fair to promote from within or hire a manager, put them in place of a team, whether it's a supervisor, a team lead, a sales manager, a branch manager. It's not fair to be like, okay, you're in place, you should be winning. Like you should be having a championship team right out of the gate. If the team was winning, that's great, and you need to fill them in. Usually that's not the case. They're not taking over building an amazing, gold medal winning team. They're inheriting something else that needs to be improved. And so how do you make sure they're progressing and that it's fair, right? What are the reasonable milestones? How do you know if they're doing well? Applying your matrix to it in the same way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Awesome. So look, some really big key takeaways from today, everybody, especially with looking at your team and kind of managing and working with your teams. If you want to go back and hit any of the points, this episode will be on the website by the end of the week. And I'm getting through the uploads to Instagram. It's just taking a very long time. But yes, don't forget, you can find us. We got our website. We got our LinkedIn page, our Facebook page, our Instagram page. You got the Call Center Confidence website. You can sign up for these live episodes at Luma /Call Center Confidence. That's LU.MA/Call Center Confidence. And they'll notify you every time we go live. And also, the good thing about it, and this is one of the comments we've had, is it's great for them to be able to watch it on the website because most companies block social media, especially when you're working on the front line. So hopefully Call Center Confidence is a page that is accessible and you can watch directly on our episodes right there. You haven't even got to worry about it. It's a win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. And if people have questions, comments, suggestions, ideas, feedback, if you like my blue background or not, email us at info@callcenterconfidence.com. Love hearing that's going to come to both of us. We do, at this point in our career, we still do answer all emails ourselves. So just keep that in mind. We will reply. And then obviously...
Unless anybody wants to be an intern and take it for us,
Yes, we are always looking for interns who want to learn the business of emails. And then if you want, and please do join us every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. For Oliver's friends across the pond.
Even though I'm not on that time zone.
You're not on that time zone, but it's for your friends that are back there. And that's it. And next week, we're going to talk about those improvement plans, good cop, bad cop. We'll be talking about it. If you're listening to this live, you're watching us today or in the replay, as soon as it comes up, the podcast will be coming out soon. We're going to start dropping those episodes. So then you can subscribe there and tune in. But that's it for this week's Call Center Confidence with Cutter and Catt. Mr. Catt, thank you once again for joining and giving so much this content and value. I appreciate it. And
same to you, Mr. Cutter. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
All right. That's it, everybody. We'll see you next week.